Gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Garrett's recognized.
So it's my pleasure, and I thank the gentlelady from Texas for some really good questions that I think dovetail relatively well with what we have in our 5 minutes. We talked about the actors being either nation states or non-nation states. I think that speaks to the nature of the threat, and it troubles me because historically the paradigm of existential threats to, and obviously a lot of you all are involved in the private sector, but I think that Mr. Knake nailed it when he talked about the tragedy of the commons. If there's not cross-communication, we're lost. And if we learn from the attacks on the grid in the Ukraine or sort of the probes in the Baltic states, we understand that what might be used against the public sector one day may be used against the private sector the next, and it really doesn't matter who the threat is, but it's different than what we faced in the past. So I wonder, and by the way, I want to get this on the record, Andy Greenberg's work, particularly in Wired, June 20th, 2017, in his book, How to Switch a Country Off, which I'm sure you all are familiar with, to the extent that there's stuff that's outside the realm of classified that can be enlightening to individuals in the room and perhaps abroad who are interested in learning about this, that's sort of sobering. Having said all of that, I'm an advocate for limited government. Having said that, if we don't information share, we're lost. If we look, I think, at what happened in Ukraine, almost everything that was used to flip the lights on and off at will on a timeline at the choosing of the attackers was off the shelf, but the whitelist, blacklist information wasn't shared, and so it wasn't caught. Can you speak to the nature of how important it is to communicate privately, publicly, and with one another? And I would love to get a 10 or 20-second bite on the nature of the threat. If you could give a 1 to 10 scale as it relates to the existential nature of the cyber threat. I think I know the answer. I want to hear from the experts, and I want it on the record because I think America needs to know the answer. We'll just work our way down the panel.
Thank you, Congressman. I would say that the expectation we should have is that everything we've seen happening overseas will happen in the United States under the right geopolitical circumstances. If the lights have gotten turned off in Ukraine when Russia saw fit to turn the lights off in Ukraine, the lights will get turned off in the United States when Russia sees that it's in their interest to do that. So I think from that perspective, we need to be planning, and we need to be planning not just for how we protect the grid, but how we will respond and recover.
And you're not a preparedness guy, but the impact of the lights going off is dead people, right? I mean, literally, human lives are lost when electricity goes out, whether it's people on ventilators, whether it's people who need their medicines refrigerated, et cetera, right? Again, I know the answer, you know the answer, but this needs to be out there so that the American people understand the gravity of the answer. I mean, but that's fair to say, right? Human life would be the consequence.
Yeah, I think the important thing is to make our adversaries aware that we will view that as the consequence, and we will respond accordingly on a national level.
And we can move down the table. I don't want to, I got a finite amount of time.
So I would say it's important to remember that a lot of the advanced persistent threat actors moonlight as cyber criminals. So they are using the same tools in their day job that they're using in the evening against, for criminal or for monetary type initiatives. And so you have to look at them as the collective and look at the tactics, techniques, and procedures in a collective in order to be effective.
I'm not even going to try to butcher your name, ma'am.
It happens all the time. So you mentioned existential threat. I think those are scary words, and I think they're appropriate words. What's new, the threat is not new. We've always had conflict with other nations. There's always been pressure there. What's new is the reach that technology brings into our lives. The nation state I have a cell phone, I have a watch. When you get into medical technology and device technology, it's literally implanted in your body. Self-driving cars. As you see this evolve, the existential threat continues to grow because it just becomes a larger, more personal way that you can be touched and attacked.
And the scale, Mr. Mayor, we're going to get to you. And the scale required to launch a decisive or debilitating attack against a nation state, it used to be measured in cavalry or battleships or main battle tanks or fighter planes, and now it could be an actor with internet access, correct?
Correct. It was over the summer, I believe, or some point earlier this year. There was a botnet that used different devices, not traditional computers, servers, things like that. They infected devices that are in your homes, and because of the prevalence and think of the availability of those, they were able to create a pretty powerful botnet that could deny service. So that's definitely something that, you know,
Mr. Chair, I'm about to run out of time. I want to give Mr. Mayor a chance, but what I want to do here today is draw on the expertise of these folks. Again, sort of recommend Andy Greenberg's work to the lay public, and certainly look forward to talking more about this moving forward, because another thing that's refreshing is the bipartisan nature, I think, of the fact that we are addressing this. Sure, people want to score political points. Yes, the Russians are bad actors. This is about America's existential future. And I think that the takeaway needs to be that the communication has to be public-private and it has to be free-flowing, because if the Ukrainians had good communication, a lot of these things perhaps are stopped because their systems are updated to recognize the malware that was used against them, at least theoretically. But if it doesn't get updated every month or every day even, off-the-shelf stuff brings the whole grid down. Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, and I'm done.
No, thank you, Congressman. And real quickly, there's no question. I mean, the exponential growth of IoT devices presents a serious risk to networks in terms of how distributed denial of service attacks can occur, and there's a lot of work being done to implement defense mechanisms. But I want to just refer to something on U.S. CERT. It's in the it's a top item on the alert. It's unclassified, and it speaks to a campaign against critical infrastructure involving electricity, water, transportation, and some others. All of the information, or a good part of the information, is in TLP traffic light protocol white. And there's a whole series of activities that can be done. That kind of information that's provided by the government is invaluable and needs to get dispersed widely, not just in terms of remediating the problem, but making people aware of how significant the threat is, which is what I think you're speaking to. Coming from the public to encourage greater government and industry collaboration in this area is very important. I think that it is bipartisan, and I think that every member of Congress can help move that forward.